So a book review on Barry Goldwater's The Conscience of a Conservative. He ran, very small book by the way, he ran in 1964 under the Republicans in the States. And he wrote this though prior, this was written in 1960, and this is a very good short political treatise on conservatism in the States, especially how to succeed and how to defend conservative philosophy, and he even talks about that. For example, in the first paragraph of the foreword, he says the challenge to conservatives today is quite simply to demonstrate the bearing of a proven philosophy on the problems of our own time. That's for every political party. Every political party has to improve a philosophy that the public can get behind. And he also says on the next page, in a country where it is now generally understood and proclaimed that the people's welfare depends on individual self-reliance rather than on state paternalism, Congress annually deliberates over whether the increase in government welfareism should be small or large. So he's suggesting here that the American values, at the heart of Americanism, is self-reliance, and yet the government wants to increase and expand itself. On the same page, he says, why have American people been unable to translate their views into appropriate political action? Why should the nation's underlying allegiance to conservative principles have failed to provide corresponding needs in Washington? There seems to be, it's interesting, there seems to be the general population of any country are always conservative. Now, what do we mean by that? It means that over time, the older you get, the more you tend to become conservative in your values. What it suggests is that you value more self-reliance. You see the government as not really a path to salvation or to prosperity. The government screws up a lot, and the older you get, the more you experience government screw-ups. Government scandals, fraud, corruption, just incompetence. And the more you believe that it's up to you, up to the individual, to make their life and to solve their problems, not a social program. That's the conservative wisdom, maybe you could say. That's the right-wing critique. And he defends that throughout the book. And it is very well written. It is short. It's surprising that books like this are written, and it seems it does so little to the history of America, as evidence of what it is today. And building on those values of self-reliance, he says, this is on page 10, conservatism is not an economic theory, though it has economic implications. The shoe is precisely on the other foot. It is socialism that subordinates all other considerations to man's material well-being. It is conservatism that puts material things in their proper place, that has a structured view of the human being and of human society. And then further on the same point, liberals, on the other hand, in the name of concern for human beings, regard the satisfaction of economic wants as the dominant mission of society. And on the same point, on page 12, the conservative knows that to regard man as a part of an undifferentiated mass is to consign him to ultimate slavery. So, again, in the values of self-reliance, it does permit individuality. If you have social programs, it tends to promote group behavior, and it tends to erase people's identities as they are slotted in to the various categories that they are recognized in. And this is probably the best quote in the book. This is on page 13. With this view of the nature of man, it is understandable that the conservative looks upon politics as the art of achieving the maximum amount of freedom for individuals that is consistent with the maintenance of the social order. The conservative is the first to understand that the practice of freedom requires the establishment of order. It is impossible for one man to be free if another is able to deny him the exercise of his freedom. But the conservative also recognizes that the political power on which order is based is a self-aggrandizing force, that its appetite grows with eating. He knows that the utmost vigilance and care are required to keep political power within its proper bounds. It seems like that is only a conservative value, to keep government in its proper bounds. Everyone else believes that. Everyone else is looking for another fight. Everyone else is looking to grow the state in another area, but not the conservative. The conservative, just as he is cheap with his money, let's say, he's also very reluctant to expand the state, because he knows that the natural order of things is to expand the state, and eventually it would take over everything. Because when you expand the state, you necessarily damage society in certain ways. And therefore, the damage done to society has to be taken up by a growth of the state again. You have this cycle. And so it seems to be always the case in history that governments get out of control. Why is it only the conservatives see that? Why no one else? Another really good point that I've been thinking about lately, earlier in the quote, when he talks about the balance, achieving the maximum amount of freedom for individuals that is consistent with maintenance of the social order. Social order. It is freedom versus social order, isn't it? Or freedom versus the state, individuals versus the state. Social order is a very tough topic. It is about how we can cooperate. To cooperate together means that we necessarily cannot do anything we want. Now, you may not want to do certain things that would harm others, and then that's not really a curbing of your freedom, because you wouldn't do it anyways. But there are other things that you may want to do, but you can't, because you live in a society. And that's where it gets to be a problem. What the problem is to how to maintain an increase in social order usually means a loss of individual freedom. And a decrease in social order usually means, or hopefully means, an increase in individual freedom. It seems like the political parties of the day, their philosophy devotes them to a certain balance between them. And it may also be possible that certain periods of time and certain kinds of people, certain cultures of people, certain groups of people are able to sustain certain levels of social order. So, for example, maybe primitive societies can have little freedoms. They must have a maximum social order. And what has been a very good way of doing that? Religion has been a very, very effective way of maximizing social order. And that's controlling. What that really means is controlling people so that they behave in certain regular, predictable ways. The state can do the same thing if it gets out of control. At the same time, are people happy in such situations? Well, what does psychology tell us? Psychology tells us that people can be happy under such conditions. They can be brainwashed to believe that they're living in a utopia, and yet it is a totalitarian state. So it's very unnerving that people can get used to such conditions. In a sense, when there's no awareness of your freedoms, they can be easily substituted for social order. Anyways, I think that's enough for this book, but it is great, it's short, and it's probably been the best book written on the conservative point of view in a while, the wisdom of the conservative point of view. That's not to say that there are not good things out of the liberal point of view as well. For example, sexual emancipation, homosexuality, heterosexuality, gay marriage, and things like that. What would the conservatives say? And what would Barry Goldwater say? Well, I don't know what he would say about that, but many conservatives say that homosexuality is a sin if they're religious, right? But what does it really mean? What are we really talking about? what we're really talking about is that sexual emancipation, which means that it's not just homosexuality, it's also that men and women can be promiscuous. That's the same thing with sexual emancipation. It hurts social order. That's the problem with it. It hurts social order because it's a freedom. So the conservatives don't like it because it hurts social order. That's what they would say. At the same time, it's not a freedom that's worth having, even if it hurts social order. Even if it lowers the amount of people who get married, and the number of families the number of family units that are operating, the number of single parents. Well, that's an interesting sociological question, but that's the kind of debates that we have today. I think that one of the most significant debates is up today and of all time, really, is the balance between freedom and social order. Social order is everywhere. You can see it in what people talk about. But I think that's really the crucial formulation of the question: social order versus freedoms. And what makes the happiest society, if that's your end? Or it may be what makes the most ordered society. But anyways, find a copy of this in a used bookstore if you can. It's very nice to have.